Hello, everybody, and welcome to Game Masters Under Dark, where this week two game masters get together to discuss your questions about running tabletop RPGs. As always, I am Will, your humble MC, and I am joined this week, as always, by Matt R. Matt, how you doing?
Good, cozy.
Yeah, I am not. I was babysitting, and let's just say my sweater got dirty, so I'm I'm missing my hoodie this week. So this week, instead of answering questions, we actually wanted to go over something we talked about in character creation, or really more specifically, I discussed, which is alignment. So for those of you who don't know, every once in a while, Wizards of the Coast, who make D&D, will come out with what they call a Sage Advice update. It's a compendium update where they change certain things about the maybe the way a spell works or the way like something is worded. So it can be something that simple to try to clarify things and make running the game easier. They had an update over the weekend, and the thing we're going to be focusing on is the thing that is alignment. So they basically went through and removed alignment from playable races. From everything I read, I tried to double and triple check. I may have missed it, but they did not remove it from monsters, just playable races. If I'm wrong, somebody can correct me in the comments, but I did not see that. I've checked for over the last couple days, and it just, like I said, just that's how it appears.
That's going to be in the comments now.
So I am going to read exactly what came out of the compendium. So the first thing is if you go to look at it, and if I remember, I will put the link directly to this section in the description. But it says that, you know, for elf, half elf, human, even the playable races added from additional books like Volos, everything just says alignment removed. And so this is what they put in the PHB Player's Handbook update, and I kind of consider it their statement on the matter. So I'm going to read this here so that we see exactly what Wizards was thinking. So
what were they thinking?
Basically, they said, for many thinking creatures, alignment is a moral choice. Humans, dwarves, elves, and other people can choose whether to follow the paths of good or evil, law, or chaos. According to myth, the gods who created these folk gave them free will to choose their moral paths. Alignment is an essential part of the nature of celestials and fiends. Both types of creatures are associated with metaphysical planes of existence, specifically the outer planes, that embody certain alignments. For example, most devils hail from the nine hells. So I had to emphasize that to make sure I didn't screw that up. A plane of lawful evil. A devil does not choose to be lawful evil or tend toward lawful evil, but rather it is lawful evil in its essence. If it somehow ceases to be lawful evil, it changes into something new, a transformation worthy of legend. So with that being said, Matt, if you need, I'll give you a minute to soak that up. What do you think about this removal of alignments, at least from playable races?
Consider me drenched. I I have soaked that up to as much as I can soak. Anyways, alignments, I've always thought, as like a homebrew person, weren't very important to me in a care. Though I do recognize that they can be like a huge aid to people like starting playing or even DMing, because like sometimes you'll be like, I don't know how to, especially for monsters. So I'm glad they kept that in there. That's cool. They're like, I don't know how to necessarily role play this kind of monster. Is it just like a rabid beast, or does it like have a agenda of some kind? And I think an alignment can kind of give you a little bit of insight on like how to handle that. when it comes to monsters. But when it came to like players and players choosing an alignment, it's fine. But but like I said, I'm not a huge fan of it because what I've seen, my experience, and this just might be my experience, is that when new players think of that and they're given that, and DMs say, pick your alignment, this is what alignment means, and they describe all the alignments and all that, a player just goes, ooh, I want to be this alignment, whatever alignment it is, doesn't matter. But then as they start playing, they start thinking, oh man, my character wouldn't do that because they're not that. They're this alignment, not that alignment. And I'm like, no, you can do it. You have freedom. Alignment's not like if you break it, then you're going to jail. And so like it's almost like if you break your alignment, I feel like it is important for your character. It would probably be like some arc, character development arc kind of going on. But it's like, don't be afraid to break your alignment. And I feel like when people, like I said in the beginning, playing D&D, looking at that alignment chart, they are a little afraid. They're like, I might be stepping outside my role if I do that. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And I try to encourage them too because it's exciting. And so I like
Yeah.
to think of alignments as um something that's like moldable over time. Like never think that you're attached to one alignment. You can change from session to session or even multiple times within a session, I think. And it just kind of makes your character really round, like as a individual. Like you are a being that has freedom of choice. And so however you decide to dictate that though is up to you. I think it shouldn't be up to a chart.
Yeah, and I agree, and I think when if I recall correctly, when we were doing my episode for the character creation, I actually said that of like this is a starting point for my character.
Mhm,
A lot of it just comes from like my background
mhm,
and things like that. So I know in the one campaign that I first started with when you and I first started playing together, I created a lawful good paladin, and there has been a couple times where you're like, but you could do this, and I'm like, yes, but I'm trying to think if there's a way I can avoid that only because once you while I do want that character to change over time, uh her background was she's royalty. So maybe there's some strings she can pull. I don't necessarily have to, brute force my way through something. Maybe there
mhm.
is a more diplomatic solution. And if there isn't, then you do what you got to do. And I know we talked about this last night, that sometimes you got to do the wrong thing for the right reason. um, but I always use that you said that alignment is like that's just a starting point.
Yeah.
If I can't think of in that case of that particular character, if I can't think of a good like lawful solution out of this problem, when we first got to the new city, what did I do? I started chucking a trident at a cart running through a city. Like that's not
Yeah.
lawful good. That's that's
Just
chaotic.
throwing sharp objects in the crowd.
Yeah. So you know that was to me that. But if you went by the alignment chart, I would not have done that. I would have been, those ruffians. They're getting away. Whereas I was like, no, I'm going to try to, murder them in the streets.
And in cases like yours, where you were trying to stick to a certain alignment, and I understood that, and I get it.
Mhm.
Especially, I think around that time, was that your first session, or you had a few before that? I think.
I had a few sessions with the other Matt,
Mhm.
in a couple of other games.
Yeah.
But when I say that, I mean I probably had played
Uh-huh.
4 sessions at most
Yeah.
before
So
we
like
started playing together. So
a little bit
yeah,
new to you still,
yeah,
and
absolutely.
so when you were like, I'm trying to stick to an alignment, and you were making these decisions, and I'm like, you can do this, and then you would give me some pushback and be like, but that's not my alignment. And what I would try to do in that case is justify or help you justify doing something else that remains in your alignment. And
Right.
pretty much bring up like, oh, royalty or like something like that, and
Yeah.
try to be like, oh, they would do this for the like greater good, and even if some people get hurt, something like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. And I think I eventually not to derail this too much, but I think I eventually went with like the superhero, like great power, great responsibility, and sometimes stuff's just got to happen.
Great power, great responsibility, minor casualty.
Yeah, and so it is what it is, and I think, like you said, I think as I learned to DM a little more, um, from like uh, from where I started to where I am now, I still think you could use it as a rough guideline, but if we had this conversation 6 months ago, I'd have been like, this is ridiculous. Why would they remove it? But
And
as I've gotten more experience, I'm kind of like, I get it.
I'm, since
It
I'm
makes
like
sense.
I'm very focused on the story all the time. And so I always like character development and
Hmm.
those kind of arcs. And I feel like if a character is just one alignment the whole time, there might be some character development in like a relationship or something between that character and another, but when it comes to like the personal growth of that character, you don't really see it unless you do at least once step out your alignment and then deal with those repercussions or effects. um because yeah, like stepping out of your alignment, it should mean something to your character if you're choosing alignments.
Yeah.
I know I brought this up the other day, is for players that have been playing for a while, a lot of times we will make characters and not necessarily think of an alignment at first. We'll just make a character, have a backstory, and then as we play, we'll be like, I guess I am a little chaotic neutral, and we'll like fall into an alignment. But I think for more experienced players, they do try to look at like almost the story, because they're playing into a story and they know how the game works, and if you play into the story, the DM has tons of material to give you and all that kind of stuff, and so they're not necessarily looking at alignments anymore. So I mean, with how popular D&D's gotten recently, I could say like the them taking out the alignments, them pretty much just being like, well, let's just all focus on story now, y'all. Just evolve your own character.
Well, and there was something that I don't remember what episode it was in, but Matt had mentioned, which is in a case like you're saying, of sometimes you got to break out of your alignment.
Mhm.
Even if you choose not to, not making a choice is still making a choice. So if
Yeah.
you, even if you're choosing not to, like, well, I'm not going to break from lawful good, which I pick on that one a little bit because I know people in the past, from a lot of my research, players who like have avoided playing paladins because it was,
Mhm.
they were afraid to kind of break that alignment. Um, but if you choose not to say break that lawful good because you're like, nope, it doesn't make sense, I'm not doing it,
Mhm.
as a DM, like you were saying, now that actually gives you something to work with. What if there's more casualties than there would have been? Like you could have helped save a big portion of a town that was under attack or something. You know what I mean? Like I'm just throwing things out there, but even choosing not to break that alignment can have repercussions on a story that now you might have to think about
That's
as a
true.
player. Like I'm looking at it from that perspective of, you just thought your choice was not making a choice, and now more people are dead. How
Those
did
were
your character handle
those
that?
words spoken. You better be careful, because if a DM's watching, being like, "Yeah, that's how I want to punish him." No.
No, yeah, well, and I that's why I said, but there are consequences. You're not. I
Yeah,
don't.
yeah, yeah.
I think you got to be, as a new DM. That's one thing I talk with you guys about regularly, and I think it fits here. Is if you were to not break that alignment or break it one way or the other, there's a difference between a consequence and a punishment. You know what I
Mm.
mean? It's a
Yeah,
fine
yeah, yeah.
line. There's a fine line, I think, between those two things. But a consequence of you not choosing to defend somebody because, oh, they're chaotic evil and I'm not going to help them. Well, now, like I said, something happens terrible to a town
Right.
where even that chaotic evil person was willing to change for the betterment of everybody.
You bring up a point that
So,
puts something in my head.
oh, I thought that's
Is
what that look was.
sometimes I've seen this, especially when I first started DMing, because I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know what I was doing. And so yeah, like the alignment charts were there. They were like posted somewhere, and I'm like, choose one, y'all. And and everybody chose one, right? And then you would have like characters just on complete opposite ends of the alignment chart, just refusing to help each other
Mhm.
because they're like, you're evil and well, you're too good, and like that kind of stuff. And that's, I think, probably the first taste of the alignment chart that I got where I went, you know what, this was a bad idea. And there's like, well, there's a few things that play there. One, the character, the players, we were all new, granted, but the players, they should have been like, well, let's kind of all try to get along. This is a team game. So let's try to all
Right.
get along. Let's help each other. Let's not avoid each other like that. And then the second thing would have been probably me being like, hey, this is the kind of game that we're playing. Nobody choose chaotic evil, please.
Yeah. Well, and that comes with experience.
Yeah, yeah.
Like you said, being new, you're just like, it's whatever.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think that the removal of this is ultimately a good thing. Like I said, I think 6 months ago, if we had this conversation, I would have had more pushback.
And they didn't
Um,
completely remove it. I'm sure there's still some, or there's going to be some semblance later, like probably like sixth edition or whatever. It's probably going to be a little smaller section, but there's going to talk about it if they're keeping it with the monsters.
yeah, I definitely, and there was another thing I forgot to copy this in there where they did talk about that. Let me pull it back up. Where oh shoot, where was it?
All right, let me fill this dead space.
Yeah, go ahead. You do that while I'm looking for it because I know I read it. Ah,
Matt's in the void and we miss him.
found it.
Okay, okay, thank God.
So in there under character details, it says in the description of each alignment, the final sentence has been replaced as shown. So for lawful good, gold dragons and paladins are typically lawful good. Neutral good, many celestials are neutral good. Uh, copper dragons and unicorns are typically chaotic good, and so forth. So down the line. So they're giving you a lot of it says typically or many, um, kind of like indicating that hey, if you're going to play a paladin, they are typically lawful good. That doesn't mean you have to be.
And I think
Um,
they're playing to the idea for new players specifically, because I think I remember way back in the day being a new player, seeing like almost like the memes of alignment charts where like it'd be like, I don't know, Lord of the Rings, and you would have all the characters of Lord of the
right,
Rings
right,
in
right,
different
right.
alignments. It's super cool. And then seeing that, then getting the archetype in my head, being like, I want to play somebody like Gandalf, like that person. And so then I'll be like, well, I'll choose that alignment and then just kind of act like Gandalf.
I'm a rogue, but I'm Gandalf,
Yeah, yeah. And
or whoever.
just like almost not really adopting that character. Maybe I wasn't a wizard, like you said, a rogue, but
Yeah,
like I would have the personality of Gandalf and I would be
gotcha.
whatever alignment they were. So like them saying those words like not always or it's
Typically,
typically, yeah, that kind of stuff. Would sounds like they're just pretty much making the alignment chart a little more of an idea chart, a little flow chart, if you will.
yeah, right, right, and that I like the flow chart. Kind of makes sense, and yeah, I mean, I didn't get into D&D with like except really for the last year since like I think it's been almost a year since we've all kind of been playing together and DMing and whatnot.
Happy
Um,
birthday.
yeah, I was say I don't know exactly when. You'd have to go back and look, but like that idea of like okay, they're typically this. I think is especially big for as I've kind of picked on them a little bit tonight, paladins, because they're you can be somebody who fights for the little guy, but maybe you're a little chaotic. Like it could happen. It depends on your role play, your DM setting, all that stuff. Um,
Get a little
but
frivolous with that smite.
right, exactly. So I do think that ultimately I've said it before, but I think this is a good thing. But I like that they're changing the wording up. They're not completely removing it from the book.
Yeah,
They're removing it from the player character options, but they're like, this is like you said, this is an idea for how you might want to role play.
right. And I came off pretty harsh against it at the beginning of this, but I will say it's not something that I introduce players to right away when I'm helping them learn D&D. It's not something that I go to right away. Um, but that said, usually they'll find it by themselves, and then I'll be like, "Yeah, we can talk about that more if you're using that as like an idea." But yeah, it's it's good. It's just not something I rely on.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, and I agree. Like I think I focused on it really hard because obviously being a player first and like
Mhm.
being new, I was like, oh, what does all this mean? And then the very first game I ever played in, I was like a necromancer, and everybody else was like a fighter, a sorcerer, and I'm like, nah, dead people. And if you go based off of the what a necromancer would be, most people would consider that like a chaotic evil. But I was like, actually, I'm raising the dead because I'm trying to find my parents. I don't know who they are, so I'm raising dead bodies to try to find my parents. That's not
Neutral.
yeah, that's not chaotic evil at all. Um, so yeah, I think if I had known about the alignment chart the first time, I probably would have played that differently. But
Being a
yeah,
homebrew person, all my stuff consists of homebrew, and you've now have full on experience of being like, that's not how it works, and me shutting you down, being like, it doesn't here,
yeah,
it does in my game. um,
yeah,
so like I love having like the like things just be different from like how they're perceived when you read the Dungeons and Dragons books. And so like sometimes an animal that might be chaotic evil might in my world just be lawful, something maybe lawful evil, something little bit more order, you know.
mhm,
And that said, it does kind of, when people play my kind of games, they're just like, we don't know what we're about to expect, really.
yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think that was when I first started to realize like, oh, I probably don't need to like have this burned into my memory.
Mhm.
Um Especially because it was funny because I was like, I'm lawful good, but I based my character off Batman and I'm like, mm, mm.
I remember that. That's right.
And so for those listening, it is possible to make your paladin like Batman if you try hard enough. And I was relatively successful.
Tried very hard. You tried very hard.
I did. Not the best build, but I was having fun, and that's all that matters.
I like that we, like, a few sessions in, we kind of forgot that you were a vigilante, but then it was like maybe the fourth session, I just went, oh, this is your like insider. This is your man on the streets when you're
Right?
vigilantean, you know,
Vigilantism.
vigilantism, you know, when you
Yeah,
were out
yeah.
there and you were just like, oh yeah, I'm Batman.
I'm Batman. And then I even multi-classed into Bard so that I could, do more things piratey, which not pirate. Batman's not a pirate, but it fit what I was
He was
what
a
I was going.
pirate in some sort of iteration out there. I saw him was one.
Right, probably. The multiverse is huge. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
See, I
so
I like to give players that kind of freedom though. Like if
mhm,
I think if you were just stuck on the idea of like, well, I gotta stick to lawful good or whatever Batman is, and then I don't think you wouldn't feel like you were as open to all those options. Um, and I mean, that's what I want players to feel, that they're open to tons of options. Like if you suddenly you're like maybe chaotic good, then you're just like, I want to swing as far in the opposite direction as possible. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no, absolutely, absolutely. And everybody, like they said, it's a moral thing. Somebody who's considered chaotic evil could have I think you guys know this because I have a son, but like no matter how crazy my characters are, it's like, well, we don't mess with kids. Like but you could have a chaotic evil character who has a family and that's their thing. Like
Mhm.
Of all the evil things they do, they never mess with kids. You know what I mean?
And
Like,
like that's what I think it comes back to, just your character's story. And it
absolutely.
doesn't even necessarily revolve around your alignment. It's just your character's story. And if you're playing to that story, then you don't even have to think of alignment.
Exactly. Yeah. So ultimately, I think we both agree. It's good that they're kind of keeping it there, especially for monsters. And I like that they're changing the wording even for characters. Like they're not completely removing it, but it's just like a hey, heads up, this is kind of how it works,
Yeah,
but
if you
but
need,
it doesn't have to
if
be.
you're like, I kind of see it as, if you're looking for a place to start looking for an idea for a character, check this out.
Exactly, exactly. So that was really the big thing that I wanted to I pulled from the compendium update
Mhm.
this week. I know we kind of I went through and looked, and there's some like changes to the way some spells work or the way they're worded. Um, it doesn't, there's nothing really huge though.
Yeah, that
Is
happens all the time.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. So is there anything else you wanted to add, or anything else you wanted to discuss this week before we sign off?
Um, Guess not really. I don't read that article, so I don't know. I don't know all
Yeah.
what's changed, but like, just, yeah, I have to like leave like a closing statement about alignments. It would just be, just talk to your DM if you want to make like a radical change to your character. I'm sure a good DM would be like, yeah, let's delve into that, like, change in personality almost, or like more morality. And it'd be exciting. It'd be exciting for you. Give it a shot. If you're playing like a druid that's all about like being very neutral, give it a shot. Maybe like go a little chaotic or go a little lawful, and that'll be like, in a good way, throwing a wrench in the plans of the DM, because then they'll be like, now this druid's like involved with law enforcement. What am I gonna do?
Oh, excuse me. So yeah, so that's kind of what we have for this week, everybody. I am going to go ahead and apologize now. This episode is for being late. I lost the cord to my hard drive that has all my stuffs on it, so it will not be here until Friday, which means this episode's coming up late. I sincerely apologize. If
I
you,
think they'll forgive you. They're pretty
it,
forgiving.
usually they are. So, but if you guys do want to catch us, I will have the audio version available a little early. We'll make a post. We do have our social media up now. I don't think we mentioned that last episode.
Wait, what's
So
that?
we have Facebook, we have Twitter, Instagram,
We have an Instagram?
we do, we
Yo,
have it
hook
up.
me up with that. I'll
I
post all tons of stuff. My
we have.
cats dressed up like dwarves.
Well, we've got it all now. So just search Game Masters Under Dark. You can see us there. And like I said, I'll let everybody know when the audio version only goes live. And then once we get the video version up, you guys will obviously see that. So just keep an eye out. And again, I apologize. Hopefully this won't happen again. And, with the holiday, with Christmas being next week and New Year's the week after, not sure if we're going to have episodes, but we will do our best. So, Matt, as always, it was a pleasure, and we will talk to you guys next week. Have a happy rest of your Friday and happy gaming. Bye.
Cat dwarf.